Imagine a setting filled with evil and corruption, where people seek to engage with celestial beings and daughters have children with their own father. This is one of the most remarkable stories in the Bible, the story of Lot. Let's talk about this man, whose choices placed him amidst surprising events, and why his daughters ended up lying with him. The story of Lot shows us the consequences of our decisions and how sometimes we end up in unexpected situations. His journey begins in a prosperous land, but one filled with evil and sin. Lot was an ordinary man, living between luxury and decadence, but he was about to witness divine power and judgment. The story of Lot shows us how important it is to be careful with the choices we make, as these choices can lead us to situations we never imagined. Get ready to witness the judgment and wrath of God, which resulted in the destruction of an entire civilization in a catastrophic event that marked history. So please, I ask you to give your like, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us until the end of this story. The first accounts of Lot in the Bible appear in the book of Genesis, starting from chapter 11. The story of Lot, a biblical figure, begins with uncertainties about the origin and meaning of his name. Some scholars suggest that he may represent the idea of a veil that covers, emphasizing the importance of presenting oneself well before others. According to the Bible, after the death of his father, Lot left the city of Ur of the Chaldeans and traveled to Haran, accompanied by his grandfather Terah, his uncle Abraham, and Sarai. When Abraham left Haran, after the death of Terah, Lot went with him to Canaan. During a time of great famine in Canaan, Lot and Abraham went to Egypt and settled there. However, after a complicated situation, the Pharaoh of Egypt expelled Abraham and Sarai, causing Lot to return with them to Canaan. During this period, both Abraham and Lot prospered greatly. Their herds grew so much that the region could no longer accommodate the two of them, leading to disputes between their shepherds. The contrast between Abraham and Lot in the biblical narrative is highlighted primarily by the choices they make when faced with opportunities and challenges on their journeys. Abraham is characterized by his obedience and trust in God's promises, which is reflected in how he conducts his life. His faith guides his choices, making him an example of someone who places the divine will above his own earthly interests. An important episode is the one with the 3 mysterious visitors in Mamre. One day, Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent under the shade of the oaks of Mamre when he noticed 3 men standing before him. The intensity of the account suggests that these visitors have a special nature, as Abraham quickly bows in respect before them. At this moment, he shows remarkable hospitality, inviting them to stay, rest, offering water to wash their feet, and food to restore their strength. During this meeting, Abraham and Sarah received a surprising news. One of the visitors revealed that, at that same time next year, Sarah, even though she was old, would have a son. This divine promise aligned with a previous one, in which God had promised Abraham a great offspring, comparable to the stars in the sky. The story of the visit in Mamre not only highlights Abraham's exemplary hospitality, but also shows the closeness of the relationship between God and his faithful servant. In contrast, Lot seemed to be increasingly influenced by the temptations of the material world and attracted by opportunities that seemed promising. For these reasons, Abraham and Lot decided to part ways. When this happened, Abraham generously allowed Lot to choose first the land he would occupy. Abraham's decision to separate from Lot, to preserve harmony and avoid conflicts, shows the spiritual maturity of this patriarch, who valued peace and communion with God above material disputes. Lot chose the green plains of the Jordan, toward the Dead Sea, near Sodom. He was attracted by the beauty and fertility of the region, allowing himself to be influenced by purely material interests. This decision, although understandable from a human perspective, highlights Lot's vulnerability to the world's temptations, in contrast to Abraham's spiritual steadfastness. After the separation, Lot settled in Sodom, where he quickly got involved in local matters and seemed to have reached a position of prominence. However, the Bible describes the inhabitants of Sodom as extremely wicked, which deeply disturbed Lot. The Apostle Peter, in the New Testament, describes how Lot was tormented daily by the wickedness he saw in the city. While Lot was in Sodom, there was a battle in which kings of Mesopotamia defeated the cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar. During the battle, all the goods of Sodom were plundered, and many inhabitants, including Lot, were captured. When Abraham learned of this, he organized a rescue force and, in a night battle, defeated the enemy army, recovering Lot's possessions and his family. It was in this episode that Abraham met Melchizedek. Even after the war involving Sodom, Lot did not leave the city, and his story continues in the Bible. The narrative continues with the visit of angels to Sodom. The city was still in chaos and full of perversion. The divine presence in the city shows God's concern with human wickedness, something that reminds us of the message of Jeremiah chapter 23, verse 24, which highlights how God is attentive to the outcry caused by injustice. The divine intervention in human affairs reflects God's commitment to justice and his willingness to act in the face of wickedness. The Lord declared his intention to investigate the sins of Sodom, thus showing his justice and rejection of sin. Faced with so much corruption, God decided to destroy the city. The Bible highlights the depravity of the inhabitants of Sodom, especially evident in how they treated the angels of the Lord. The men of Sodom, in their sinful conduct, wanted to have sexual relations with the angels, which was one of the main reasons for the city's destruction. During this tumult, Lot tried to calm the situation in a controversial manner, offering his daughters to the men of the city, an action that shows his weakness and how the city negatively influenced him. At this point, the Bible highlights Abraham's brave intercession before God, showing his sincere quest for divine understanding and justice. Abraham, knowing of the imminent destruction of Sodom, asks God if it is possible to spare the righteous along with the wicked. This conversation reminds us of the message of James chapter 5, verse 16, which says that the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. The story continues with the bold negotiation between Abraham and God, in which Abraham questions the possibility of sparing the city for the sake of the righteous living there. Psalm 86, verse 15, reflects this situation, proclaiming, "But you, Lord, are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness." This passage shows that God is willing to hear the supplications of his servants and ready to act with compassion in response to fervent intercession. The story shows not only God's compassion, but also the importance of persisting in the pursuit of justice and mercy. When God decided to destroy the cities of the plain, including Sodom and Gomorrah, the Bible recounts a significant event. Before the destruction of Sodom, Lot and his family were rescued by two angels sent by the Lord. This deliverance happened thanks to divine mercy and to God's commitment to the covenant he had with Abraham. When the inhabitants of Sodom tried to capture the angels, they were struck with blindness. The angels then ordered Lot to take his entire family out of the city that was about to be destroyed. Lot hesitated to leave Sodom, and the angels had to forcibly lead him out of the city. During the escape, the family was instructed not to look back. However, Lot's wife disobeyed and was turned into a pillar of salt. This transformation is an example of the consequences of ignoring God's instructions. Although Lot was spared from imminent destruction, he was not free from the consequences of his choices. His decision to live near Sodom exposed his family to a harmful environment, and the story shows Lot's struggle to maintain his moral integrity amid the surrounding corruption. Lot's struggle is similar to the challenges that Christians face today, living in societies with values that differ from biblical teachings. After leaving Sodom, Lot and his 2 daughters went to a small town. Fearing for their lives, they took refuge in a cave in the mountains, showing hesitation in fully trusting God's plan. This attitude contrasts with the confidence that Abraham showed during his journey, even in the face of uncertainties and challenges. Lot's decision to take refuge in a cave symbolizes, in a way, the human tendency to seek isolation when confronted with difficulties. The cave may represent not just a physical shelter, but also a state of emotional and spiritual isolation. This leads us to reflect on how traumatic experiences can affect a person's ability to fully engage in life and in their relationships. It was there that a terrible event occurred. Concerned about preserving the family lineage, Lot's daughters, fearing for their safety and with no prospects of finding husbands, planned a desperate action. At a certain point, Lot's daughters got their father drunk, and on consecutive nights, each one lay with him, in an action that resulted from a lack of understanding of moral and ethical norms. From this incestuous union, Moab and Ben-Ammi were born, who became the ancestors of the Moabites and the Ammonites, respectively, peoples who caused many problems for the Israelites throughout biblical history. The narrative about Lot in the Bible continues to highlight his complicated and controversial relationship with his daughters after the events in Sodom. After this point, Lot's story does not present further details. It is unclear whether he managed to rebuild his life or if he spent his last days in the cave in the mountains where the events with his daughters occurred. Interestingly, the Apostle Peter mentions Lot in his second epistle, specifically in chapter 2, verses 7 and 8, referring to the episode of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. In the New Testament, Jesus mentions Lot in the Gospel of Luke in an apocalyptic context, recalling the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's salvation. This account serves as a reminder for the end times, highlighting the importance of being prepared and obeying God. The biblical account shows that Lot had the chance to learn from Abraham, known as the father of faith. However, unlike his uncle, Lot was not guided by faith, but by his own perceptions and desires. This approach brought many problems and left deep scars in his family. The story of Lot serves as an example of the consequences of choices guided more by personal interests than by faith and divine guidance. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah offers important lessons for current Christian life. The account emphasizes the need to make ethical choices, even in the face of contrary cultural pressures. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, advises believers not to conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewal of the mind. This guidance, found in Romans 12, verse 2, reflects the need for Christians to stand firm in their faith and moral values, regardless of external influences. An important aspect of this lesson is that cultural pressure can be intense and seductive. In a world that often values individualism and hedonism, Christians are called to stand out, living according to God's principles. The story of Lot in Sodom is an example of how giving in to cultural pressure can lead to disastrous results. Lot, who initially chose the region of Sodom for its apparent prosperity, ended up exposing himself and his family to a corrupt society. His story alerts us to the importance of considering not only the immediate benefits, but also the spiritual consequences of our decisions. Moreover, the biblical account highlights the importance of compassion and intercession. Abraham, knowing that Sodom was about to be destroyed, courageously interceded for its inhabitants, asking God to spare the city if there were righteous people there. This attitude shows us how important it is to pray and care for others, even for those who live in sinful situations. Abraham's intercession reflects a genuine love for his fellow humans and a desire to see God's mercy manifest. The story also emphasizes the importance of staying vigilant. Jesus, when speaking about the destruction of Sodom, highlighted the need to be prepared and attentive, for the end can come suddenly. This reminds us of the importance of living our lives in a way that we are always ready to meet the Lord. Being vigilant does not mean living in fear, but rather living with purpose and a heart dedicated to God. I hope the story of Lot inspires us. Leave your comment with your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you want to know more amazing stories from the Bible, just click on one of the 2 videos that will appear on the screen. A hug, and stay with God.